Ladies and gentlemen, the rest of the world is entering the month of November, but in Venezuela, they're about to be in July because things are heating up. President Trump just made a very bold statement, literally saying Nicolas Maduro's days are over. Maduro is the socialist dictator in the country who is quite frankly overstaying his welcome. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I know this very well because I was the one that was pushing Venezuelan election integrity news last year on the American mainstream. For about a week in July, my entire X page was just Venezuelan news. Maduro unilaterally declared himself winner despite the majority of Venezuelans voting to kick him out. I was literally translating Spanish to English. Leaders in the Venezuelan military withdrew because they knew the protesters were right. Neighboring countries like Peru and Argentina were recognizing the opposition as the rightful winners of the election. I kept saying Maduro's days are numbered, and now the President of the United States is saying the same thing. In his interview with 60 Minutes, President Trump said this.
On Venezuela in particular, are Maduro's days as president numbered?
I would say, yeah. I think so, yeah.
And this issue of potential land strikes in Venezuela, is that true?
I don't tell you that. I mean, I'm not saying it's true or untrue, but I wouldn't.
Why would we do it?
I wouldn't be inclined to say that I would do that, but because I don't talk to a reporter about whether or not I'm going to strike.
I don't understand what these reporters expect Trump to say. At exactly 12:01 p.m., we're going to send the B-2. We're going to send the F-16s. We're going to send F-35s. We're going to have 5 Navy carrier strike groups surround, like, hey, only dummies reveal their strategies if they are going to go to war. Here's the other portion of that question.
Are we going to war against Venezuela?
I doubt it. I don't think so, but they've been treating us very badly, not only on drugs. They've dumped hundreds of thousands of people into our country that we didn't want. People from prisons, they emptied their prisons into our country. They also, if you take a look, they emptied their mental institutions and their insane asylums into the United States of America because Joe Biden was the worst president in the history of our country.
That was a fairly non-answer from the President of the United States, so I'll answer it for him. The United States is absolutely interested in a regime change in Venezuela, and I support it. I know that's going to shock you, but I have a really interesting reason for supporting it. I'll get into that in a second. But before we do that, here is the Venezuelan opposition leader and also the recent Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Corina Machado, who wasn't actually the candidate. Edmundo Gonzalez was actually the candidate on the ballot, but everyone knew by voting for him, they were voting for Maria.
Do you support US military strikes on the territory of Venezuela as part of what you call a process?
I believe that the increase in pressure and the escalation that's taking place is the only way to force Maduro to understand that it's time to go.
She said it. And guess what? Venezuelans agree with her because they did a poll of Latin Americans across the continent, and a huge majority would support the overthrow of the Maduro regime. Because when your neighbor's house is on fire, it's only a matter of time before yours is. Maduro hasn't just made Venezuela broke. The guy has created a humanitarian crisis where millions of Venezuelans have left the country and have moved to neighboring countries, as well as the United States. I'm going to talk more in detail why, on principle, I support this situation, but on a surface level, there's almost 1 million illegal Venezuelans in America today, and Maduro doesn't want them back. The simplest solution is just change Maduro and put in a regime that is favorable to America and wants its citizens back. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is the most ethical overthrow in history. Everyone should love it. Hey, George, why do you support a regime change in Venezuela, but not in Iran or Iraq or Syria and all the other places we have conducted regime change? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's very simple. I subscribe to the Monroe Doctrine, which, contrary to popular belief, was not authored by President James Monroe, the 5th President of the United States, president after James Madison. It was authored by none other than Secretary of State John Quincy Adams. It should really be called the Adams Doctrine. John Quincy Adams contributed greatly to America. He followed his father to Europe during the war, interned in statesmanship and diplomacy. He was actually the U.S. ambassador to Prussia during the Napoleonic Wars. It was actually he who convinced his father that the French, controlled by the Directorate after the French Revolution, literally wiped out the royal family of France, that the French were interested in peace with the United States. America probably wouldn't be the place it is today if we went to war with the French after just defeating the British. So John Quincy Adams wrote the Monroe Doctrine. To put it simply, the doctrine embraces the non-interventionism of a George Washington, coupled with the kind of ambition of a Alexander Hamilton. Under the Monroe Doctrine, the Americas would be the domain of the United States of America, meaning North, Central, and South America was our playground. Only we, the Americans, were going to be allowed to have any influence in the newly formed nations that were gaining their independence from Spain, France, the UK, etc. And in return, we wouldn't be interfering in Europe's affairs. But the Western Hemisphere, the New World, was our territory. Not that we own every country in it, but that we would have regional hegemony. It was establishing that the Americas were a no-go zone for European influence and colonization, or Eastern Asian influence and colonization. How does this apply today? Well, the United States is the global superpower. We have the ability to project our might everywhere at the same time. We can literally fight the world and win 10 times over. Most of us disagree with the wars we've been involved in. We want to basically stop entangling ourselves in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe, defending their borders while ours is open. So it's completely okay for us to withdraw from the rest of the world, according to the Monroe Doctrine. But still, the Americas is where we absolutely have to influence. It's beneficial for our trade, our economy, our safety. This is why Trump forced Panama to kick China out of the Panama Canal, which the United States built and should own. This is why we're willing to bail out Argentina, so they're not aligned with the Chinese, because it undermines American hegemony when we're supposed to be this powerful nation that protects its neighbors, yet a giant country like Argentina is controlled by China or Russia. And that brings us to Venezuela. Ladies and gentlemen, Venezuela fell to socialism, and the Venezuelan people have been living under it for a few decades now. They used to be one of the richest countries in Latin America. They had a middle class, and today they are poorer than ever. And it's solely because of socialism. And people who say, oh no, it's because of crippling sanctions from the United States, then why hasn't Russia fell? We wake up every day and invent new sanctions to impose on Russia. How come they still have a middle class and have a good GDP? It's because Russia is an open market, pro-trade economy. Things like this undermine U.S. credibility in this region of the world.
Russia has finally entered the battlefield to assist Venezuela against the United States. Russia's Ilyushin Il-76 giant cargo landed today in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, carrying 50 tons of supplies and 200 personnel. Let me tell you, this cargo plane is globally famous for delivering rockets, helicopter parts, warheads, military equipment, and it can supply S-400 systems. Apparently, all these supplies have now reached Venezuela. For the S-400, it's being reported that 2 to 3 more trips will be needed. I should also mention that this Il-76 completed a 2-day journey to reach Venezuela, passing through Germany, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. This mission also serves as a moral support gesture. Moreover, they stated that Russia's military support and supplies will be fully available to Venezuela. While Ukraine is receiving support from Europe, NATO, and the United States in the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia will definitely support Venezuela. As I mentioned before, 80 to 90% of Venezuela's military equipment is Russian-made. Now, only the U.S. troops and F-35s are monitoring the Caribbean Sea in Latin America, and an attack could happen at any moment.
Is that a good thing for America? The biggest oil country in the world, by the way, aligned with a strategic adversary to America. I'm not Lindsey Graham. I don't think Russia's our mortal enemy and we have to do everything to fight them all the time. But the world map is a chess game, and it seems like Russia and China keep pushing pawns closer and closer to the 8th rank, and eventually they'll promote into new queens. If Venezuela is aligned with China and Russia, what does that mean for us? We can't do business. Venezuela has huge oil reserves. Our companies would love to set up refineries and rigs and make use of that oil and profit for America as well as for Venezuelans. Venezuela could be the UAE times 10, but they're not because they have a socialist dictator. So yes, this maximum pressure campaign on Venezuela is to trigger a regime change one way or another, whether it's through a physical confrontation or getting elements within Maduro's own government to turn on him. I mean, a CIA officer was trying to convince his pilot to fly him somewhere where the US would nab him. And these things aren't always necessarily pretty, but they must be done. We can't have a neighbor of ours aligning with our enemy. It's just a bad look for us. Do we look and control when Cuba, Venezuela, and now Colombia to a certain degree are talking to us like we're not their big daddy. Like, that sounds crazy. I'm sure I missed a lot of critical details in the video here, but I hope you understand my perspective and maybe have a different view of why Trump is doing what he's doing. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you all, and goodbye.